What's up, everyone? I'm Justin Burkholtz. Thank you for watching. It's time for another book review. This week, I have quite an amazing book to review for y'all. It's going to be all about Luis Elizondo's new book, Imminent, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs. This was an incredible book. As you can tell, I've taken a lot of notes. I actually ran out of little post-its and had to tear up some normal sized ones. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to try and go through it quickly. And if you have not been following the UFO topic lately, there's going to be some totally mind-blowing stuff here, so stick around. Before we get to the review, I just want to take a second to say thank you to all the new subscribers to the channel. I know I haven't posted any videos in a little while. I was traveling a lot this summer, and then I actually got COVID and was very sick for a few weeks and just absolutely had no voice and no stamina and couldn't do any recordings. I was doing a lot of reading during that time and other research, and so I do have some awesome stuff planned and some projects I've been working on now that I can actually get back on camera and record for you all. In the meantime, I know a lot of you have just come over to the channel because you saw me on the podcast, on the Soul Inspired podcast with Joe Borowski, or Tia Renee's podcast, talking about my near-death experience and personal or spiritual experiences that I've had. And I know a lot of you, came over from those and subscribed to my channel. So thank you all so much. Your support means a lot to me. I did finally cross the 500 subscriber threshold and got my congratulations email from YouTube. So that was really cool. And, I just want to maybe try to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. I think that would be incredible. I started the year out at 100 subscribers. To multiply that tenfold in the year would just be incredible. And so I thank you all so much for, watching my appearances on those podcasts. I do have another one coming up that has been recorded and has not aired yet. I think that'll be coming out in the next few weeks as well. And I've been contacted by other people to come on my channel or for me to appear on theirs. So I've got a lot of collaborative stuff kind of in the works. So that's really exciting. If you do, want to support my channel, the best way that you can do that is to just hit that subscribe button. If you're not already subscribed, like the videos, watch my videos, comment, share, that kind of stuff. That's really the best way to help me out and support me at this time. If you do, want to support me more than that, I do also have a couple of books I've published, and you can find links in the description below to purchase those from my publisher. All right, let's get to the review. So before I get into the meat of the book and all of the claims and statements that Luis Elizondo makes in his book, Imminent, I need to talk a little bit about who is Lou Elizondo, because this is very important before I talk about all of the claims and statements that he made, so that you understand that this is coming from a very high level insider within the government, within the Pentagon, and that what he has to say is very credible, and he is a loyal patriot to America, and he is specifically very careful about what he states on interviews and in his book. Everything goes through the DoD's review process for publication and review called DOPSR, and he's very careful to not disclose any classified or sensitive information. So I just want to kind of talk about his background, and that's where the book starts out as well. So that will set you up to take what he has to say seriously, hopefully. Now, I do have to say that officially the Pentagon has been pretty terrible to Lou ever since he resigned in 2017. And that's because he exposed programs within the Department of Defense and within the Pentagon that was, inconvenient for people. And so there was some, retaliation involved there, and some, frankly, illegal actions by Department of Defense officials, some of whom have been investigated and removed since. But if you look up official statements from the government, from the Pentagon on Lou Elizondo, they mostly deny everything. And for years, that's all they did. They basically pretended like he didn't exist. They had no idea who he was. They were denying all of his claims that he even worked in the roles that he worked in, which, as someone who spent his whole life serving his country, in combat zones and then in counterintelligence, I'm sure that was very hurtful to him and his family, to be, disrespected and lied about, to the American people. So I want to start out by referencing a document that is in the appendix to his book, and it is a letter written by the former Senator Harry Reid, explaining that he personally knew Lou. He personally created the program that Lou worked for, studying UFOs for the American government, and that he vouches for his leadership in that organization and his devotion to our nation. So I'm going to pull that up and just read a quick excerpt from that. And I want you to keep that in mind if you, say, look him up on Wikipedia or something. I have no idea what that page will say. I don't trust Wikipedia as a reliable source of information, especially when it comes to people like government whistleblowers. That kind of stuff can very easily be edited and then locked so that he can't, change those edits and correct them. So I don't know what it says on there. And if you look him up in the media, you may find statements from the Pentagon denying what he says or that he worked there. So let's turn to what Harry Reid had to say. The appendix to this book is full of interesting documents, links to other documents that are very interesting as well. Some FOIA'd emails, the letter from Harry Reid. It contains a copy of his own resignation letter that he wrote to the Secretary of Defense of the time, General Mattis. And they're all very interesting documents, all of which I actually am very familiar with and had read myself before this book came out. So I can verify that, yes, these are legitimate letters and emails and everything, and that there are public records for these. Most of these are actually in congressional records at this point because the congressional hearings that have happened. So I can vouch for the veracity of these documents in the appendix. Outside of Lou's book, I was already familiar with all of them, but they are very relevant to his story. So if you take a look here, you can see this letter with the official letterhead there of Senator Harry Reid. And I just want to read this very short letter out to you. It's dated April 26, 2021, on Harry Reid's letterhead with his signature, and it says, "To whom it may concern. As the United States Senate Majority Leader, I worked with Republican Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska and Democratic Senator Dan Inouye of Hawaii to secure $22 million of funding for what would become known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, otherwise known as ATIP, an unclassified but unpublicized investigatory effort dedicated to studying unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, otherwise known to the public as UFOs." He continues, "As one of the original sponsors of ATIP, I can state as a matter of record Lou Elizondo's involvement and leadership in this program. Mr. Elizondo is a former intelligence officer who has spent his career working tirelessly in the shadows on sensitive national security matters, including investigating UAPs as the head of ATIP. He performed these duties admirably. Signed, Harry Reid. So, when the Pentagon makes statements about Lou, take those with a grain of salt, and I would, for at least the next few years, just expect them to be blatantly false. Also, statements made by the former head of the new government program studying UFOs, the AARO, known as AARO. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was heading that for a while before he resigned. He has made statements that are also blatantly false about Lou, about the government's investigations of UFOs. And he has made statements both to Congress and to the public that are provably false. So I wouldn't trust anything coming out of Sean Kirkpatrick or AARO or the Pentagon when it comes to UAPs, because they have been lying about this for a very long time, and they retaliate against whistleblowers. In fact, Congress passed new whistleblower protections for government whistleblowers as a direct result of Lou's actions and the retaliations taken against him. But we'll get to that later. As he states in his introduction, in late 2008, I began a new job over at the Pentagon after several tours with other U.S. intelligence agencies. Shortly thereafter, my life changed forever when I was recruited into a highly strange and sensitive U.S. intelligence program, unlike any I had ever been a part of. The program investigated the global mystery that is unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP for short, also known to many as UFOs. For nearly a decade, I found myself on the front lines of the biggest paradigm shift in human history and learned the reality of our place in the universe. Unidentified craft with beyond next generation technology, including the ability to move in ways that defy our knowledge of physics and to do so within air, water, and space, have been operating with complete impunity all over the world since at least World War II. These craft are not made by humans. Humanity is in fact not the only intelligent life in the universe and not the alpha species. Yes, I know that's going to take a bit of time to process, but buckle up, there is a lot more. UAP and the non-human intelligence controlling them present at best a very serious national security issue, and at worst, the possibility of an existential threat to humanity. And that's really what it came down to. When Lou resigned from his senior role in the Pentagon, studying UFOs and working on other projects there, he left a very comfortable position that a lot of people want and covet and work their entire lives for. He left a very stable income. He left a nice home in Maryland, and all of that security to jump into the unknown and to take a serious risk at what ended up being a serious financial cost to himself and reputational cost to himself to bring this to the public. So one of the things I want to talk about is that, people are very cynical, and I get it in today's age, and they think everyone out there who publishes a book or talks about UFOs is just a grifter who's trying to make money off this. For people like Lou who leave a well-paying job with, security, job security, and, comfortable life, to leave all of that behind to really do something that's totally very risky and really unknown, it doesn't make financial sense. This is probably the worst financial decision that Lou ever made in his life. And if you want proof of the fact that they're not just doing this for the money and they're not making a lot of money off of this, I mean, maybe he's making some now from his book, but you can just watch the recent interview with his wife, with Ross Coulthart on News Nation, and she talks about how they left their nice home, suburban home in Maryland, and ended up living in an RV. She talks about how Lou left his, good salary job. She left her job that had a good salary. They came to California, and Lou's job didn't ultimately end up working out. She had to get a job at Target and then at Home Depot just to make ends meet. Okay, these people didn't do this for the money or the fame. Once again, Lou was an intelligence and counterintelligence officer. The last thing they want is the spotlight shining on them. His entire life has been staying in the shadows and staying out of the spotlight. So this is uncomfortable for him. He doesn't give a lot of interviews, or at least he hadn't for the last few years. He is now that his book is out. And he did not gain from this at all, financially or reputationally. In fact, it's been very much the opposite. He took a serious risk to do this, and he really should be hailed, I think, as an American hero, a real whistleblower who did things correctly. And we should really thank him for bringing this to the public, because his work is the biggest change in the public perception around UFOs and UAPs was due to what he did. So we'll get to that. In the appendix to his book, there is also a copy of the resignation letter that he wrote and submitted to the Secretary of Defense. So I want to read some of that so that you can hear in his own words why he felt he had to leave the Pentagon and go directly to the people. So this says, Mr. Secretary, it has been my sincere honor and pleasure to have served with some of America's finest men and women in both peacetime and in war. For over 22 years, I have been blessed to learn from and work with world-class leadership, you certainly being among the very best. With that in mind, bureaucratic challenges and inflexible mindsets continue to plague the department at all levels. This is particularly true regarding the controversial topic of anomalous aerospace threats. Despite overwhelming evidence at both the unclassified and classified levels, certain individuals in the department remain staunchly opposed to further research on what could be a tactical threat to our pilots, sailors, and soldiers, and perhaps even an existential threat to our national security. In many instances, there seems to be a direct correlation the phenomena exhibits with respect to our nuclear and military capabilities. The department must take seriously the many accounts by the Navy and other services of unusual aerial systems interfering with military weapon platforms and displaying beyond next-generation capabilities. Underestimating or ignoring these potential threats is not in the best interest of the department, no matter the level of political contention. There remains a vital need to ascertain capability and intent of these phenomena for the benefit of the armed forces and the nation. For this reason, effective the 4th of October 2017, I humbly submit my resignation in hopes that it will encourage you to ask the hard questions. Who else knows? What are their capabilities? And why aren't we spending more time and effort on the issue? As I transition to a new chapter of my life, please know that it has been an honor and privilege of a lifetime to serve with you. Rest assured, no matter where the path of life may lead me, I will always have the best interest of the department and the American people as my guiding principle. Signed, Luis D. Elizondo. So you can hear there that he felt that there were bureaucratic challenges and ideological challenges that were preventing the Department of Defense from taking this issue seriously and spending enough time and resources on it to even ascertain whether it is, an existential threat to humanity or a threat to our protected aerospace, which it seems very obviously to be. And he just wasn't able to get where he needed to go. Plans that he tried to put in motion were stymied. He was, continually told that he would not get access to certain, information, no matter what kind of level of clearance and whatnot he had. He faced opposition from private aerospace companies who he knows have materials and possibly even entire craft made by non-human intelligence. And for all of those reasons, he felt that he needed to bring this information to the public so that it could get before Congress, so that real progress could be made within, UAP disclosure. And so the book is really a story of how all the UAP amendments and laws have come to be passed based on the actions that Lou took. And so what happened was in 2017, he, when he resigned, was in possession of three now very famous videos: the Gimbal, the Go Fast, and the Tic Tac videos. And he was in possession of other information about this secret program to study UFOs. And with the help of Chris Mellon and Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal with the New York Times, they published that information and published those videos as well for the public to see. Now, one of the interesting things is the OSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, after that opened a criminal investigation into Lou to harass him and discredit him and make his life hell. Eventually, it was found that he had not done anything illegal, and the story of how those videos got cleared for publication to the public is actually very interesting, and he goes over exactly how that happened. And yes, those videos were cleared by the Department of Defense to be shared with anyone and everyone he wanted to. He got total broad public clearance to share those videos. I don't think they ever foresaw them being shared in the way they were, but that's what happened. So we'll talk about that. What's really interesting is that when Lou was tapped to run this program, he had no interest in UFOs, didn't believe in them, and he recalls a conversation he had with Jim Lukatsky, who was one of our top kind of rocket scientists and engineers, who was running a predecessor program to ATIP known as OSAP. I know there's a lot of weird acronyms and stuff. And Jim asked him, "What do you think about UFOs?" And his answer was just, I don't think about UFOs at all. And Jim told him to keep an open mind. Well, later on, as Lou's actually briefed into the program and he starts meeting with people, he recalls an experience where he was briefed by a Brazilian military commander or general or something. I forget what his rank was specifically. And this Brazilian gentleman briefed them on a series of incidents in a town called Colares in Brazil that happened, I believe, let's see. Yeah, in 1977. So I want to talk a little bit about what he learned here. So what he says is that Colares was a small coastal island which at that time had a population of about 10,000 people. Before that evening, he had never heard of these occurrences, and officially the Brazilian government stated that they investigated this and they didn't find anything. Of course, that's what they stated, probably under pressure from the U.S. government. But he initially thought it was some kind of group hysteria or something like that. He didn't believe that this could be real. But what he learned from, let's see, what's the gentleman's name? Mr. Uchoa, was that there had been quite a few incidences with UAPs and these orbs of different kinds. And by one estimate, the body of evidence compiled on those incidents includes more than 3,500 case files because the Brazilian government sent doctors out there to document the injuries that people were receiving. People were being terrorized by these UAPs. They were following people. They seemed to harm people, whether intentionally or not, we're not sure. And people were really freaked out about this, and it was happening quite a bit. It says here that one doctor, Dr. Carvalho, who went to investigate it, treated about 40 people in 1977. Most had burns consistent with exposure to either thermal or directed energy. The burns healed once the skin peeled off, but some were left with major scars. Others had rashes. In the fresh wounds of 23 people, Carvalho noticed that the center of the burn displayed 2 puncture wounds. And when she tested the victims' blood, she found out that all of them had low hemoglobin, which suggested that their fear of the chupa chupa, as they called them, which means suck suck, because they thought it was sucking out their blood, was not completely unfounded. Another person logged more than 300 animals found dead of unknown causes during the same time. 34 citizens complained of irritated eyes. 5 reported temporary blindness. 8 reported a negative change in their vision. 41 complained of a prolonged feeling of nausea and sometimes vomiting. 55 individuals reported extreme headaches. He wondered if these people had experienced some form of radiation damage. This will come back later because there are actually U.S. military personnel who have suffered similar injuries, some of which are now on 100% permanent disability from the U.S. government, acknowledged because of their exposure to UAPs. So keep that in mind. It says further on here, 46 people described feeling heat when the lights of the aircraft focused on them. 28 people felt a pocket of cold air. About 18 people insisted they'd been abducted by beams that sucked them into the craft. This doctor also verified that some of these people were found far away from the site of the original encounter with no memory of traveling there. 14 people remained in a catatonic state for short periods following an encounter. 54 suffered a temporary paralysis in some part of their body. 36 people claimed chronic illnesses plagued them for years after. Of that group, 10 people died. That struck me, he says. These people were dead, ostensibly from a UAP. Lou states that this is one of the moments that really changed his mind and made him think, wow, okay, people are being injured and possibly killed by these things. This is definitely something that needs to be taken seriously. Another interesting topic that he touches on here in one of the chapters of the book is what is known as remote viewing. You may be familiar with the now declassified government project known as Stargate, where the U.S. government was training military personnel to psychically investigate using remote viewing because they had supposedly found out that the Soviet Union had a remote viewing program, and so they wanted to, keep up with them and develop their own program. What you may not know, because our government denied that this program was effective, is that our government's and military's remote viewing program was actually very effective. So effective that at least one remote viewer who was very good ended up dead, most likely assassinated. But he makes some very interesting claims here, as Lou was actually tangentially associated with that program. He actually worked with Hal Puthoff, who ran the Stargate program in ATIP, and there's a long connection between remote viewing and UFOs. If you're not familiar with that connection, I am definitely not going to get into that on this video. There's a lot there. It's very confusing, but there's a serious role that consciousness and what we would think of as psychic abilities have with UFOs and UAPs. They are very related. But getting back to the government's remote viewing program, Stargate, and its effectiveness, Lou gives a couple examples here that I think are super interesting. And I like to talk about topics that are controversial and misunderstood and usually dismissed out of ignorance and prejudice. So this fits with the kind of topics of my focus of my channel. So he gives some specifics here. He says, let's see, extrasensory perception had won over supporters in government who were initially dubious, then shocked that the technique worked. No one understood the mechanism. The CIA didn't care why it worked. The only thing that mattered was that it did. When government-trained psychics focused their attention on a particular subject, they gleaned images, feelings, thoughts, and intelligence that were otherwise impossible to collect via conventional spy tradecraft. Stargate became so successful, Hal Puthoff, the one running it, reported directly to the director of the CIA and the White House on a regular basis. And all of this is true. This all can be confirmed very easily. As a measure of the program's success that can be talked about, its psychics once located a Russian supersonic jet that had crashed somewhere over Africa. Our best satellites couldn't locate it, and neither could the Russians. One of our remote viewers saw and pinpointed the exact location of the downed aircraft in the Congo. The U.S. was able to sweep in and salvage this valuable target based on the remote viewer's visions alone. Okay? That's super interesting, but there are numerous cases like that that are very specific, where we gained very important intelligence information directly from remote viewers and not from any other source. No one, I don't think, understands how this works, but we do know that it's possible. And also, it seems that anyone can be trained to do this. You may be wondering if our government and our military have known about these UFOs and UAPs and non-human intelligence for decades, going all the way back to, I would say, at least 1945. Why is there so much resistance to look into this and to let the public know? Well, this was one of the parts that honestly enraged me the most about his book. And it's because a lot of the pushback on this comes from an ideological perspective of people who are Christian religious fundamentalists at high levels within our military. And they think they know what's going on, and they are convinced that it's all demonic. They're just demons, and anyone looking into this is consorting with demons, so we shouldn't even look, even though they have demonstrated themselves to be a serious national security threat. A threat to our pilots' safety, a threat to the safety of civilians who have been negatively affected by UAPs, threat to the safety of our military personnel who come into contact with UAPs. And the fact that the reason we haven't been told and the reason that we haven't looked into this further and had the best minds on the planet looking into this issue is that people think they're demons is outrageous and was hard to read. So I just want to once again take another look here at his words. He says, remote viewing was deserved. Oh, remote viewing deserved science, not scorn. Yet closed-minded zealots stormed in and trampled Stargate to death. In the waning days of the program, one member of Stargate was stunned to hear a government supervisor's reason for opposing further funding. This is what that supervisor said. He said, quote, "You are working with people who are in league with the devil." As crazy as it sounded then, I later heard similar nonsense from high-level government officials determined to shut down our UAP investigation, but we'll get to that later. Needless to say, it is not good for the United States or humanity to have these sorts of closed-minded officials who reflexively fight and dismiss anything that questions their personal religious beliefs. To say it holds back progress and growth is an understatement. It also gives our adversaries an advantage since they do not have these moral hurdles. I think that's a really important point to make. As a counterintelligence officer, his role has been to make sure that the United States is at least keeping up with the intelligence efforts of other nations, if not exceeding them. And the fact that people's personal religious beliefs and ideologies were preventing us from looking into things that we know our adversaries are researching is insane. I mean, he states it as well as it can be stated there. One of the most interesting conversations recorded in the book is actually between Lou and Hal Puthoff, who I had mentioned earlier. Remember, Hal Puthoff has been involved with secret, highly sensitive government projects for decades. He has been a part of the Presidential Daily Briefing, reported directly to the head of the CIA and the White House, etc. Hal is one of the American scientists who knows more secrets than 99.9% of Americans and even probably military personnel. And so at one point, Lou is in a skiff with Hal, which is a secured facility, and Hal asks him, or states, Hal tossed off the most enticing one-liner I'd ever heard, it says. "Well, it all goes back to Roswell in 1947. "Wait, Roswell was real?" I asked. Hal looked at me, clearly weighing whether to bring me further into his circle of trust. "Yes, Lou, it was real." "You mean to tell me that a UAP actually crashed and we covered it up?" "That's exactly what happened," he replied. I went quiet and let his words sink in. Hal went on to tell me something else that truly blew my mind. 4 deceased, non-human bodies were in fact recovered from the 1947 Roswell crash. So there we have, inside of a classified setting, someone who we know knows some of America's deepest secrets, confirming that Roswell was real, and not only did we recover a crashed non-human craft, but actual non-human bodies as well. Now, I know this isn't going to be brand new news to people who have been studying the UFO topic, but once again, these are very credible people, very high-level people, people who have the highest levels of security clearances that exist, stating that this stuff is real. And with Roswell in particular, if you look at the Air Force's history on that, it's pretty easy to see that they are covering something up. Now, is it exactly what Hal states here? I don't know. Hal, I don't think he was alive at that time, so I don't think he was personally, privy to any of that. He may have seen the craft or the bodies, decades later. I don't know. But the Air Force has come out and made several official statements about what happened at Roswell. And every time it's been a different story. Now, for anyone who watches criminal trials or true crime, you know that when a guilty person keeps changing, or when a person is being interviewed by the police and they change their story multiple times, there's a really, really good chance that they are guilty and they are lying about everything they are stating. So, when the Air Force comes out with their third different story about what really happened at Roswell and that we should just trust them on that, I'm urging you to not trust them, because they've basically proven that they can't be trusted, and they've already admitted to lying about what happened multiple times and then said, oh, but this is the real story. It was actually a different secret program. Don't listen to what the government says happened at Roswell, please. So how did it come to be that this topic is so stigmatized that, everyone who even talks about a UFO is just written off as some crazy psycho or some hoaxer or grifter or something like that? How did that happen? It wasn't by accident, and it wasn't natural either. There was a concerted effort by the American government to spread disinformation, deceive people, discredit people. And so Lou breaks down exactly what that effort looks like. And he has 7 steps here. And this is the UAP playbook. And this is why a lot of people still don't believe that UAPs are real. This is what the government does. Step 1, admit nothing and deny everything. Step 2, make counter accusations. Step 3, retrieve the pieces of the crashed craft. Step 4, whisk the retrieved materials away to undisclosed locations. Step 5, work in secret to reverse engineer this vastly superior technology, lock down all scientists and engineers who come near the recovered wreckage. Step 6, intimidate witnesses into saying nothing. Discredit those who don't play along. Make them look crazy. Paint abductees as country bumpkins or glory-seeking frauds. Stigmatize outside researchers who attempt to intelligently glean the truth. Stigmatize the topic. And step 7, threaten anyone who utters a single word about this topic with the U.S. Espionage Act and the promise to execute anyone who defies their secrecy oath by reminding them of what happened to Julius and Ethel Rosenberg for selling atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. So if you're wondering why more government whistleblowers and civilian whistleblowers haven't come forward on this topic, or why there's so much stigma around it, based on that playbook that our government has been following since 1947, it becomes really easy to understand how we got to where we are. And actually, in the foreword to the book written by Chris Mellon, another former very high-level person within the Department of Defense, he actually goes further into exactly how all of this happened and how he's seen the stigma around the topic fortunately change for the better since working with Lou and since bringing this stuff to the public. Another really interesting incident that Lou documents here in the book really should have been the smoking gun for every American citizen to know that this is real. And this is a really interesting event that a lot of people I know are not aware of, so I just want to briefly talk about it here. And this happened in July 1952 when Harry S. Truman was president. Multiple UAP resembling lights penetrated downtown D.C. and buzzed the White House and the Capitol over 2 consecutive weekends. There were hundreds of eyewitnesses, and many local newspapers put out the story on their cover. The strange objects did what no known aircraft then or since can do. They soundlessly parked themselves in the air, then zipped away at incredible speeds. When Air Force pilots pursued them, the objects abruptly changed direction and disappeared. In some cases, the lights split in 2, each piece going in a different direction. One pilot shot at them, later justifying his action as a last-ditch measure because he knew that his state-of-the-art fighter aircraft had no hope of overtaking them. Interestingly, I heard reports that when the pilot shot at one of the objects, a piece of one aircraft fell to the ground and was recovered. But after a thorough investigation, officials chalked up the DC incident to a flock of birds. Yep, mysterious lights flying over the White House in downtown Washington, D.C. over the course of several weeks, but, people were just mistaking a flock of birds because, we've never seen one of those before. In this section of the book, Lou describes various incidents like that. I'm not going to read them all. He discusses quite a few that he investigated while he was a part of ATIP and that he feels are credible. I wanted to talk about that one over the White House because everyone always says, oh, why doesn't a UFO just land on the White House lawn? Well, they kind of did. They kind of just flew over the White House, a whole group of them, sat there, and then we, sent some fighter aircraft to drive them away, and they ran away. That's as close as we're ever going to get, I think, to an actual UFO landing on the White House lawn. So make sure that you look through those sections to see the other incidents that he details. Some of those incidents that he details are very frightening. If you're not familiar with UFOs, you should know there's a long documented relationship between UFO or UAP activity and nuclear sites, whether they are sites where we refine and produce nuclear materials or nuclear power plants or nuclear powered submarines and aircraft carriers, or whether it's fighter aircraft or other military installations that have nuclear warheads. All of those have been targeted and interfered with by UAPs. This should be a serious issue and should frighten most people. And in fact, he states that there were several incidents where we were literally on the brink of nuclear war because we thought that Russians were initiating a nuclear strike against the U.S., but in fact, UAP were tampering with their nuclear silos and facilities and bombers and things like that. So how many times did UAP almost start a nuclear war that destroyed humanity? I don't want to know. That it even happened once is serious cause for concern and more than enough cause to take this seriously. But as Lou states here, the whole time we lied to ourselves and basked in the glow of our presumed dominance in the field of nuclear energy, while far more intelligent life observed and interfered. Though it is not common knowledge among civilians, UAP have trifled with nuclear weapons all over the world, bringing the global superpowers close to war. There are many events that I am not legally able to speak about, but there are some I can. Crazy enough, he details many such incidents here, but one point really stood out to me. He states that in September 1971, despite almost all of the planet's population having no clue, a treaty was signed by the U.S. and the Soviet Union titled Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Outbreak of Nuclear War between the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Article 3 of the treaty states, quote, the parties undertake to notify each other immediately in the event of detection by missile warning systems of unidentified objects, or in the event of signs of interference with these systems, or with related communications facilities, if such occurrences could create a risk of outbreak of nuclear war between the two countries. So UAPs were written into international treaty in 1971. It seems that both nations at that time knew that these intrusions and interference, as they state, were happening, and that it was a serious threat, and they needed to take it seriously enough to sign a treaty about it. As Lou studied this phenomenon, certain patterns emerged to him. And one of those was particularly disturbing to me, and it had to do with the so called orbs that people see. This is one of the most commonly reported, UAPs. Are these sort of orbs of light, small orbs of light. They're reported to be able to pass through walls and things like that, even pass through people in certain instances. And they are in different colors. Now, we have no idea what these things are. They seem to be intelligently controlled. Sometimes they seem to follow people or kind of harass people. And according to all of the records that he saw, it seemed that blue orbs were potentially very dangerous. And in numerous instances, people who came into contact with blue orbs came away with serious injuries. So I want everyone to know, if you see a UAP and it is a blue orb, please stay far away from that. Unless you want some kind of radiation or directed energy injuries, please stay far away from those. He states that Will Livingston, his team's medical consultant, had studied a case of blue orbs that passed through a woman's body, causing her to become ill. In another instance, at Skinwalker Ranch, a place the government investigated for many years, 2 dogs owned by a rancher chased a blue orb into a field, only to vanish in a yipe, leaving behind nothing but 2 grease spots on the sagebrush that contained remnants of the 2 dogs' biology: bodily fluid, blood, and small amounts of tissue. Literally all that was left of the poor creatures. To researchers, it looked as if the orbs had somehow vaporized the dogs, scorching nearby vegetation. A beam of directed energy from a powerful laser or radioactive weapon was the presumed cause. 2 colleagues in particular were under medical care for both cutaneous and visceral injuries that were sustained from interactions with UAP while working with OSAP/ATIP. And we had numerous reports of negative biological effects associated with UAP encounters, especially orbs, and especially blue orbs. So, I have no idea what these blue orbs could be or why they are more dangerous than, say, the green orbs that were seen and followed Lou to his home and were seen by his wife and children on numerous occasions. The green orbs don't seem to cause negative biological effects, but the blue ones, at best, cause injuries and at worst completely vaporize living beings. So, like I said, don't chase any blue orbs. Stay very far away from them if you see them. Do you remember when I mentioned the whole demonic thing earlier, where certain people within the U.S. government think that psychic abilities, remote viewing, UAPs, UFOs, extraterrestrials, whatever, they're all just demons serving the devil? Well, Lou has another good example of exactly how this is preventing us from making progress. And he recalls an interaction he had with someone. And it goes like this. This person walked up to him and asked, "Have you read your Bible lately, Lou?" "Sir, I am familiar with the Bible," Lou said. What a strange thing to ask, he thought. "Lou, you're opening a can of worms, playing with this stuff," Woods said. It was clear to me he was talking about UAP. I can't imagine the look on my face, but I'm sure Woods could tell I was perplexed, as any normal human being would be. "It's demonic," he said to me. "There is no reason we should be looking into this. We already know what they are and where they come from. They are deceivers, demons. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was a senior intelligence official putting his religious beliefs ahead of national security. Once again, I find this infuriating, but Lou is not the only one who's testified to this being a reality. It's come up over and over again over the last at least 50 years, probably going back farther than that, that there are certain people who are so sure and so closed-minded and so religiously fundamentalist that they can't even conceive of there being any reason to look into this further, even though it is very clearly a national security threat. I think if demons are real and these things are demons, that would be even more of a reason to figure out how to stop them, maybe, how to protect ourselves from them. Maybe that's just my thoughts. Moving on from that, Lou talks about some very interesting other discoveries that he made while investigating this topic. Now, it's important to note that all of the people Lou investigated who were UAP experiencers were U.S. government and military personnel. He did not investigate any civilian experiencers. Okay, so he stuck exclusively to military videos, to military personnel, and he says that even there, the amount of evidence and information and data was totally overwhelming. But one of the things that he looked into were so-called implants, devices or things that were implanted into people without their permission and without their knowledge. Now, were these secret U.S. government experiments like MK Ultra, where they were doing things to people without their knowledge? I certainly hope not. Those programs were dark enough as it is. But I also think that the capabilities that Lou describes of these implants are and were far beyond what even experimental U.S. technology could do. At one point, he states that there was an implant that was removed from a U.S. military person who had come into contact with a UAP, and that this implant moved on its own accord when the doctor went to try to surgically remove it. It seemed to try and evade his attempts to remove it. Not only that, it's a metallic object that is surrounded in some kind of biological casing that appears to prevent the body's normal immune reactions from taking place and fighting against that object and causing inflammation and stuff where the object is and when it moves through people's bodies. Furthermore, once the object had been removed and was being studied under a microscope, one of the doctors studying it said that it had its own metabolic activity and was moving on its own, and it freaked this person out so much that he never wanted to see this or anything like it again. There are pictures of one of these implants, or there's a picture at least of one of these implants. It looks weird. Lou says that inside the weird biological looking casing that we can see, there was a metallic object that had no normal features of a chip or like a microchip or something, but did seem most likely to be that. It also seemed that this object plus whatever biological material it was encased in were intelligent in some way, or at the very least reactive to their environment and could move on their own. That's pretty creepy. He also documents another incident of alleged UAP implants, and what he says was a senior CIA official and his wife who had a terrifying UAP experience in the backyard of their own home. When they awoke lying on the ground in the yard, the CIA officer had a small hole punched in the back of his neck, and his wife had a small metallic object recovered from her nose. Making things even more interesting, CIA doctors were notified of the circumstances and examined the patients. What was the purpose of these implants? Were they tracking devices? Mind control? Did they collect and transmit data? We have no idea. But they exist, and they have been removed from multiple civilians and military personnel. And he even goes on to state where exactly some of these specimens were sent to medical institutions such as the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institute of Health, and a U.S. Army research facility at Fort Detrick in Maryland. In the next chapter, Lou discusses several incidents where people were physically harmed by UAP, and I've discussed some of these already. One in particular in 1980 in Rendlesham Forest on a very sensitive joint base with US and UK forces that had all kinds of secret experiments and stuff going on, and nuclear weapons stored at this facility. A UAP allegedly landed there, and 2 US servicemen came into contact with it, one of whom has been awarded 100% permanent disability in writing by the U.S. government due to his interactions with that UAP. That's a very interesting incident that is definitely worth looking into. So if you want to look into that further, look up the Rendlesham Forest incident, and there will be lots to look into there. This research into the physical effects and harm of UAP led Lou to working with a now very famous, very reputable scientist by the name of Dr. Gary Nolan. Now, at the time, Gary was not public with his work researching UAP materials and UAP biological effects, but he did work with the government's program to study those effects. In particular, he looked at the images of brains, MRI scans of the brains of people, military personnel, who had come into contact with UAP or who had allegedly had UAP extraterrestrial encounters. Something very interesting came out of that research, and I'm not sure what to make of this, and I don't think Gary or anyone else fully understands what the implications of this are. But a pattern emerged in the MRI scans, and that was a specific enlargement of a part of the brain known as, I believe, the caudate or caudate putamen. And this is a part of the brain that has to do with intuition and kind of perceiving one's environment. And what they also noticed is that all of the people who had these UAP experiencers, in opposition to the public's opinion that all these people are country bumpkins or crazy, in fact, in reality, these people were all very highly intelligent and had much higher than average IQs, as well as the specific, morphology or evolution of this one specific part of their brain. Now, they're not sure if that is a result of the UAP encounter or if it's kind of like a prerequisite for being able to see and contact UAPs or extraterrestrials. But it's a very interesting data point and one that we should definitely note. At this point, about halfway through the book here, he turns from discussing all of the things he discovered during his investigation to what they tried to do with that information. One of the really interesting things they tried to do was to set up a trap to gather information on UAPs. This was known as Operation Interloper. And what Lou says is that the plan for Interloper was to use one of our nuclear-powered carrier strike groups as bait. We would pick a designated spot in the Atlantic and drop in a huge nuclear footprint, one irresistible to our friends from out of town, as they were later called. Nuclear powered carriers, nuclear powered destroyers, nuclear capable assets, nuclear powered submarines, all in the same vicinity within a huge body of water. The trap would now be set. Nukes and water, two things that UAPs have consistently been related to. Our partner agencies would allocate hidden collection assets in the vicinity. When the UAP showed up to investigate our maneuvers, the trap would be sprung. We would then focus all of our intelligence assets on data collection. The details of the technology we would use remain classified, but they were capable, to say the least. The logistics of such an operation were daunting, but achievable. After all, carrier groups routinely traveled together in this fashion. Unfortunately, this plan was stymied by high-level people within the Department of Defense and was never brought before the Secretary of Defense himself. I think it was stymied because of those religious fundamentalists that we discussed earlier. A really fascinating chapter here in the book then discusses a theory proposed by Hal Puthoff for how these craft might function, and it explains all of the 5 observables and also potentially why certain craft are shaped and sized in the way that they are. Hal's theory is that these craft are capable of creating a time-space bubble within which they are in a separate space-time than what surrounds them. And so they are able to then, they're not directly fighting against gravity. They don't come into direct contact with air or water, which is why they don't create sonic booms or splashes, etc. It explains all of the observed phenomenon, and very interestingly, why some of the crafts might be shaped in the way that they are. So you can see at the bottom there's a time-space bubble with a flying saucer inside of it, and then a tic-tac or bar-shaped object with 2 devices that can generate this time-space bubble on opposite ends of the craft. There could also be triangular-shaped craft with 3 or 4 of these time-space bubble generators in it, or very large boomerang-shaped craft. Now, all of those shapes will be very familiar to people who've been following the UFO topic. There are consistently reports of triangular craft, of flying saucer-shaped craft, of tic-tac or oblong bar-shaped kind of craft, and of these very large boomerang or wedge-shaped craft. In fact, that is exactly what was described in the famous Phoenix Lights incident, where I believe thousands of people in the Phoenix area saw an enormous craft that blocked out large portions of the sky, fly at relatively low altitude over the city of Phoenix in the 1990s. This craft was reported to be very large and shaped exactly like that kind of boomerang shape. And for my material science people, people who want the nuts and bolts and want to see materials that were engineered by non-human intelligence, he also discusses a study that has now been published in a scientific journal done by Dr. Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée, where they looked into some very strange material that came from a 1977 incident in Iowa, where molten metal seemed to drop out of a UAP and had been recovered. This incident had been thoroughly investigated at the time, and some of that metal material had been saved and was subjected to analysis by Gary Nolan. What was very interesting is the samples contained elements you'd find anywhere in our solar system: sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, iron, and manganese. However, some of those elements had been engineered as isotopes of the original element. Why would anyone manufacture three different isotopes of magnesium and four isotopes of iron? At the atomic level, the isotopes were arranged in a matrix with very deliberate organization and structure between them. Our experts didn't know how we could replicate such things. Furthermore, there seemed to be some fractal properties associated with the material. Interestingly, the materials seem to have the ability to transmit multiple frequencies. As Hal explained it to me, normally antennae must be at least half the size of the waveform to work. This material, however, seemed to be able to transmit frequencies at a much larger amplitude than it should have been able to. Hal speculated that you could transmit a vast amount of data across such material, but no materials experts who inspected these isotopes knew how you'd go about making them. In fact, Lou paid an aerospace company to try and recreate one of the UAP materials that they had studied, and they did make a small plate of this kind of magnesium bismuth material at the cost of $1 million for a small piece of it. And they weren't able to replicate the extremely fine layering and organization at the atomic level of the actual original material. So this was in the late 2000s that this work was trying to be done, replicating a material that was found in the 1970s. You need to remember that. Even in the late 2000s, we couldn't replicate this thing. We couldn't make it. There's no way that any human technology made this in the 1970s or in the 1940s when other things have been recovered. So this has been going on for a very long time. And yes, it's possible that someone might be able to recreate one of the materials today at an extremely exorbitant cost. Why would they do so? And they definitely could not have been able to do that 50 years ago. The rest of the book details Lou's personal decision to resign and to bring this to the public, and the actions taken by Congress afterward. All of the National Defense Authorization Acts that have UAP legislation in them, the increased protection for whistleblowers, the official statements from the Pentagon, the setting up of the new office, publicly acknowledged office to study UFOs known as ARROW. And all of this is a direct result of Lou's actions. But he also talks about the personal cost and the toll it took on him, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. This wasn't something he did for financial gain or for fame or anything like that. He took a serious risk financially, and he knew that his reputation would also be at risk, that his former bosses and coworkers would retaliate against him, unfortunately. So I really encourage you to look at Lou as a real human being who took a serious risk to do something that he felt was very important. As he says in his own words, "Don't get me wrong, I have always safeguarded classified information from enemies. But as a nation, we hid the reality of UAP from our own people. Heck, we were hiding the truth from our own leaders. This was an egregious violation placed upon us as keepers of the secrets." He also details how he became involved with Christopher Mellon and how the two of them figured out a way to bring this information to the public. Lou states that one of my team members knocked on the skiff door, the secured facility door, and said, "Sir, a former very senior level DoD official is here to talk to you." They had checked the guest credentials, and he had the Office of Naval Intelligence clearances he needed to be in the building and to end up in a skiff with me. I was very curious what this guy wanted. A few moments later, Jay, another colleague, and I entered our skiff conference room to find a tall, fit man, sharply dressed with a leather satchel under his left arm. "Hi, I'm Chris Mellon," he said. Chris went on to humbly fill us in on his professional experience working for the DoD. The headline, so to speak, was Chris served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. In that position, he was only one step removed from the Secretary of Defense. He oversaw all Department of Defense intelligence activities and special access programs. Chris was a very senior level official. Lou says here, "My staff member had really undersold who was at the door when they simply referred to him as very senior." Lou says that he initially sent Chris away to get all of the proper clearances, tickets as they refer to them, so that he could be fully briefed on the UAP topic. Lou thought this would be a task that would be virtually impossible to do. However, it seems that Chris came back a week later with all the right documentation. They double-checked everything, and he had, in fact, gotten all the necessary clearances to be fully briefed on the topic. After he was briefed by Lou, they both knew that this was serious and that things were not going in the right direction, and they weren't on the right path to do something about this while, Lou was staying in his current position. They then ended up formulating their plan to take things to the public. And that's when they were able to get the now famous 3 UAP videos filmed on military technology that were released in the 2017 New York Times article. Lou then documents, like I said previously, all the ways that UAP has been written into our laws since he came out in 2017. It seems the first time this happened was in the second COVID bill. And there was language inserted that stipulated that the DoD had to release a UAP report by the following summer. The full language of the bill amounted to 422 words and was unprecedented. Not since the 1960s had Congress instructed the DoD to take any action regarding UAP, let alone issue an unclassified report that could be shared with the American people and the world. Trump signed that bill into law in late December 2020. The next event that would happen was in late 2021 when the DoD announced that they would be opening a new office for UAP investigation. This office would become known eventually as AARO and is still currently operating. A month later, 2 days after Christmas 2021, President Biden signed the second UAP bill into law. In May 2022, one requirement of the new law went on full display. Congress held a historic public hearing on UAP. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. The very fact that it happened was monumental, and it made clear to many civilians and elected leaders that they needed to press the UAP issue going forward, and that DoD was covering up the topic. The language of this bill is very important, and according to Lou, leaves zero doubt as to the veracity of the UAP issue. For example, it described how this new office, AARO, would report to Congress on all cases pertaining to UAP from January 1st, 1945 on. That date was critical. 1945 was the year that marked the deployment of the atomic bomb, and soon after that, the Roswell crash. This bill also included whistleblower protections. And this was very important because I think this is the only reason that we have had new whistleblowers like David Grush, come forward. The language stated that anyone, civilian or military, who ever signed an NDA relating to UAP would be free to speak to Congress in a classified setting. Engineers who analyzed legacy crash materials could finally talk. Pilots and radio operators could finally talk. Members of highly secretive crash retrieval teams could finally talk. And it would be illegal to fire them, punish them, or take action to ruin their pensions, careers, or security clearances in response. In fact, whistleblowers could sue to recover damages. There you have it. It is, like I said, a mind-blowing book, especially for people who haven't heard a lot of these, stories or cases or claims before. And even if you have, I don't think there's ever been anyone at this kind of high level, insider inside the government, inside the DoD, coming forward and saying this stuff and verifying all the claims that have been made over the years. Not only that, but Lou then took this to the public. He released the first verified videos of UAP and got a lot of changes written into law so that we can actually make progress moving forward. This book, Imminent, was fascinating and details the whole journey from him getting started in the military to all that he's done now. It's a great book. There's a lot of really important information in here, and I really recommend anyone who's interested in American national security or UFOs or anything like that, even if you're just interested in physics, to give this book a read and give Lou a shot. I think he's an American hero, and I think that what he's done has been a huge service to the public. Now, you may not know this, but I am really new to the UAP topic. My first exposure to this was the congressional hearing where David Grush testified that the United States had a secret program to retrieve crashed UFO and reverse engineer their technology. He testified, once again, under oath to Congress in a public hearing, that we had recovered non-human biologics, meaning alien bodies. He testified that there is a cover-up. He testified that people who try to speak out have been retaliated against, including himself. I've seen that retaliation. It was disgusting. So I think this is a very important topic. While I am new to it, when I saw that congressional hearing, it really opened my eyes and made me take this seriously for the first time. And that was just last year. In that year, I have learned a lot. And yeah, a lot of it is disturbing and sometimes infuriating. But overall, I think we're moving in the right direction. I don't think we're alone. I don't think that we're the alpha species here. I think something else has been here for a long time. I don't know what their intentions are, but it seems very obvious that there is non-human intelligence on this planet with us, and that they have interacted with us, and that the American government has been keeping this secret and lying to the world and to the American people, even to American presidents. That's a serious issue, and I really think that everything Lou's done has been incredible to move this forward. And I know personally I wouldn't even know about this if not for him, and if not for the whistleblower protections that were put in place that allowed people like David Grush to come forward. So I highly recommend this book. Whether you are a longtime UFO aficionado, or if you don't believe in UFOs at all, either way, this is super important and really should be read by at least every American who wants to know what's going on in the world today. If that sounds interesting to you, I'll have a link below in the description where you can purchase the book for yourself. And I'll also have a couple links down there to my own books that I've published if you would like to support me in my efforts to cover controversial topics with an open mind and a sort of academic scholarly approach. Because that is what I do here. You may have seen I make videos about things like prayer and witchcraft and spiritual practices of various kinds, strange phenomena like UFOs, or anomalous experiences of various kinds. And my goal is always to bring an open minded and compassionate approach to these subjects and really try to understand them. I have to admit, the UFO, UAP rabbit hole is deep and crazy and full of a lot of nonsense. But within all of that, there is something real, there is something tangible, and it's very important. So I urge you to have an open mind about this topic. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please hit the like button. If you learned anything, if you have any questions, if you read his book and you have any comments, please leave those down below. And once again, thank you for watching.